Emily never enjoyed flying, but this trip felt different from the moment she stepped onto the private business class cabin. Her husband, Daniel, sat quietly beside their 8-year-old son, Noah, staring out the window with unusual tension. Daniel was the CEO of a billion-dollar technology company, yet today he looked nothing like the confident leader who inspired thousands of employees. His fingers tapped nervously against the armrest, and he kept checking the cabin behind them. Emily leaned closer and whispered, "Is everything okay?" Daniel forced a weak smile. "Just tired." She wanted to believe him, but something felt wrong. Daniel rarely lied to her, yet his eyes carried a fear she had never seen before. As the aircraft reached cruising altitude, flight attendants began serving drinks. Emily accepted a glass of sparkling juice while Noah happily looked through the clouds, pretending they were floating castles. For a few peaceful moments, the family looked like every other passenger on board. Then Daniel suddenly froze. His gaze locked onto two men walking slowly down the aisle. They wore dark suits, expressionless faces, and spoke quietly into small earpieces. Neither looked like ordinary passengers. Daniel's breathing became heavier. Emily noticed his hands trembling. "Daniel?" she asked softly. Without looking at her, he whispered just loudly enough for her to hear. "They're here for me." Her heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" He shook his head. "No questions. Just stay calm. Whatever happens, keep Noah close." Emily turned toward the aisle. The two men were still approaching, scanning every row with calm precision. Other passengers barely noticed them, but Daniel looked as though he had seen ghosts. Thousands of frightening thoughts rushed through Emily's mind. Had Daniel received threats? Had someone discovered a dangerous business secret? Were these assassins, federal agents, corporate rivals? Noah sensed the tension and quietly grabbed his father's hand. "Dad, are we in trouble?" Daniel squeezed his son's hand gently, but never took his eyes off the approaching men. "Everything will be okay," he whispered, though his voice lacked confidence. The two suited men stopped only a few rows away. One of them looked directly at Daniel. For 15 long seconds, silence filled the cabin. Emily could barely breathe, convinced her family's life was about to change forever. She had no idea that what happened next would reveal a truth about her husband that he had hidden for decades, and it would leave her completely speechless. The two men continued walking until they stood directly in front of Daniel's seat. Neither reached for a weapon nor spoke immediately. The entire cabin seemed strangely quiet, as though everyone had sensed that something unusual was happening. Daniel slowly stood up. Emily grabbed his wrist. "Please don't go!" He looked at her with a calm expression she hadn't seen since the flight began. "Trust me." One of the men spoke in a low, respectful voice. "Mr. Carter?" Daniel nodded once. "We've been trying to reach you. Your encrypted phone has been offline." Emily frowned. She had never heard of an encrypted phone. Daniel carried only one mobile phone as far as she knew. The second man took out a leather wallet and briefly showed an identification card. Emily couldn't read the words from where she was sitting, but Daniel recognized it immediately. His tense shoulders relaxed. "They're with the agency," he said quietly. Emily stared at him. "What agency?" Daniel hesitated, searching for the right words. "I wanted to tell you someday. I just hoped that day would never come." The lead agent glanced around the cabin before speaking again. "Sir, we have confirmed that the people who have been tracking you know you're on this flight. We need to move you to a secure section immediately." Emily's heartbeat quickened. "Tracking him?" she asked. "Who would do that?" The agent looked at Daniel, silently asking for permission. Daniel nodded. "For the past 4 years," the agent explained, "your husband has been assisting an international investigation into financial crimes involving several powerful organizations. His role has remained confidential because revealing it could endanger innocent people, including your family." Emily felt as though the floor beneath her had disappeared. Her husband was famous for building one of the country's fastest-growing companies, but she had always believed that was his entire world. Long business trips, unexpected meetings, and late-night phone calls suddenly began to make sense. "You mean," she whispered, struggling to find her voice, All those times you said you were meeting investors. Daniel lowered his eyes. Some of those meetings were real, he admitted. Others were part of the investigation. I couldn't tell you because the fewer people who knew, the safer you and Noah would be. Tears filled Emily's eyes, not because she felt betrayed, but because she realized how heavy the secret had been. The man she thought she knew completely had been carrying a dangerous responsibility alone, believing silence was the only way to protect the people he loved. The agents quietly escorted Daniel toward the front of the aircraft, while another officer remained with Emily and Noah. Although the cabin crew continued serving passengers to avoid causing panic, everyone nearby could sense that something serious was unfolding. Emily watched her husband disappear behind the closed curtain separating the first section of the plane, wondering how many secrets had been hidden behind the gentle smile she had trusted for years. Noah looked up at her with worried eyes. Mom, is Dad going to be okay? Emily forced herself to smile and gently brushed his hair aside. Yes, she said softly. Your dad always keeps his promises. She hoped her words were true. Nearly 20 minutes passed before Daniel returned, accompanied by the same two agents. His face looked tired, but the fear that had been there earlier had disappeared. He sat beside Emily and reached for her hand. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Emily didn't answer immediately. She simply looked at him, searching for the man she had married. You carried all of this by yourself, she finally whispered. Why didn't you trust me? Daniel lowered his eyes. It was never about trust. Every person who knew the truth became another possible target. If someone tried to force information from you, I wanted you to honestly say you knew nothing. Emily realized the burden had been far heavier than she had imagined. While she had occasionally complained about missed anniversaries, unexpected business trips, and late-night meetings, Daniel had been living with the possibility that each mission could be his last. One of the agents stepped forward. Because of the evidence Mr. Carter helped gather, several leaders of the criminal organization were arrested this morning. The threat to your family has been greatly reduced. Emily looked at Daniel with tears in her eyes. So it's finally over? Daniel nodded slowly. I think it is. Noah wrapped his arms around his father without saying a word. Daniel hugged him tightly, closing his eyes as if he were grateful simply to hold his family again. For the first time in years, Daniel no longer had to hide behind carefully chosen words or invented meetings. The truth had been painful, but it had also brought freedom. Emily understood that real courage isn't always loud or celebrated. Sometimes it is the quiet decision to carry a heavy burden alone so the people you love can live in peace. When the plane finally landed, there were no flashing cameras or dramatic announcements waiting outside. Instead, airport security quietly guided Daniel and his family through a private exit while the agents stayed close. The operation had ended, but precautions were still necessary until every remaining suspect had been located. As they walked toward an unmarked vehicle, Emily slipped her hand into Daniel's. I don't know everything you've been through, she said, but I know one thing now. You were never choosing work over us. You were choosing to protect us. Daniel looked at her with relief. Those words meant more than any award or business achievement he had ever received. I'm sorry for the lies, he replied. Every time I left home without telling you the real reason, it felt like I was breaking your trust. But if I had told you, I would have placed both of you in danger. Emily nodded slowly. The pain of being kept in the dark hadn't disappeared, but she finally understood why the truth had been hidden. Over the following weeks, Daniel stepped away from public appearances while authorities completed the investigation. News reports spoke about the arrest of a large financial crime network, but his name was mentioned only briefly. Most people still believed he was simply a successful CEO who had assisted investigators with company records. Only a handful of people knew how deeply he had been involved. Life gradually returned to normal. Daniel began spending more evenings at home. Family dinners replaced late-night business trips, and weekends were no longer interrupted by mysterious phone calls. Noah loved having his father coach his soccer games, while Emily treasured the ordinary moments they had once taken for granted. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset from their backyard, Noah looked at his father and asked, "Are the bad people gone now?" Daniel smiled gently. "The ones who wanted to hurt others have been stopped, and now my most important job is being here with you." Emily rested her head on his shoulder. She realized that courage is not measured by titles, wealth, or public recognition. Sometimes the bravest people are those who quietly accept difficult responsibilities without expecting praise. Their family's greatest victory wasn't surviving a dangerous secret. It was rebuilding their trust through honesty, forgiveness, and the choice to face the future together.